Wanjiru, so the Institute for Social Accountability is among several civil society and professional organizations that came together last year to launch a campaign called Okoa Uchumi.
Right.
All right. So first, Okoa Uchumi was about looking at our public debt.
Right.
Okay. So give us an update on this.
Yes, we got together because we were very concerned as civil society that we were engaged in various processes, whether it's at county level, in terms of doing budget monitoring, training citizens, working with counties. And we realized that national level priorities were squeezing the space for devolution. Was squeezing the resources available for county level planning. So yes, you elect a governor, blah, 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 but they come in and the finances aren't enough. And we realized there wasn't enough scrutiny at the national level, and particularly with regard to the debt situation. At this point, of course, everyone was aware we had a debt problem. Businesses were struggling, revenues were falling, teachers were not getting paid and all of that. So we analyzed the situation and realized that the core of the problem was a lack of political accountability. And so what we seek to achieve as Okoa Uchumi is to build political accountability in debt management. We want increased public participation. We want increased transparency. We want accountability of our public officers in the way they administer debt. This has been an area that's been left to the Treasury and a few people, even Parliament, we realize has not been robust in terms of its oversight over debt. They make good pronouncements, but then continue to approve, dubious and irresponsible sometimes debt financing decisions. So that is why we came together. Then COVID happened, and a new angle was added to this, which is public resources need to enable the country recover. We need to identify those priorities that will cushion Kenyans and also help the country fight COVID and help the country recover. We've had some gains. There's a new administration in Treasury, and we have to acknowledge that we've seen some improvement in terms of some of the disclosures that are happening, but there continue to be gaps. And the issue of political accountability is still out there. So that's my long kind of analysis or snapshot of what we seek to do and where we are now.
Let me ask this question. In pursuit of this goal, and it is an excellent one, what role does public participation play in all this?
It's fundamental. Public participation is fundamental because of public participation is part of is an underlying tenet of democracy. It's fundamental to good governance and accountability. It's a foundational pillar of the Constitution. It's the foundation of the social contract. So that's the theory. When it comes to practice, we find that the public participation in the national budget is not happening in the way that it should. We are not able to engage robustly and achieve results. So for instance, civil society is not able to engage with Treasury in the debt process. The public are not given a window for engagement in debt discussions because those key documents around which debt decisions are made tend to be open to online submissions. So you can do your memoranda, and we do that. The Treasury will kind of listen to some or may not. But then that's it. We are able then to engage a little bit at the parliamentary level. But what has happened under this administration and in Kenya actually, Parliament often will not override the decisions being made by the executive.
Yeah.
So unfortunately in Kenya, debt is still squarely under the Treasury, and the Treasury is still squarely under the OP. Instructions really come from the very top. So we do not have enough independence and accountability of the Treasury. We do not have enough independence of the debt management body. So we do not have enough oversight. So we don't have public participation, but even Parliament does not exercise oversight. So our debt, it's not a surprise that we're in a crisis.
But does our constitution confer upon Treasury any degree of independence? Because it is a government department.
Yeah, well,
It's a government ministry.
the Constitution might not go into that level of detail. It is up to the framers of the law to craft separation of powers and the independence of individual offices.
Okay, now let me ask the question. Is there a time in our history or in any period of our democracy when Treasury has exhibited a certain degree, a certain operative word here, of independence?
You ask a very good question, and I'd say no, there isn't. I think you're getting to the heart of the matter, that we have a new constitution, but the culture is the same one. And the point is, who does Treasury serve? Which means the basic requirements for approving debt in this country are not being met. And I think that's a question only the CS can answer. It could be political will. It could be political will or political will or political will.
It could be many things,
yeah,
but all of them will lead to the same thing.
I think the other thing is information management is a thing.
Yeah.
It really is a thing. And our public finance system has been under a lot of reform, a lot of change. And data management is a challenge. But having said that, you're talking about the Treasury.
But here's Wanjiru, we've talked
Very
about
well-resourced body
we've
with
made suggestions
all the capacities.
here,
Yeah.
and we've looked at the merits of sharing information, even on a micro level, when you're looking at a basic unit of function, like family. The parents would tell their family, look, this is where we are. We are either superfluous in terms of what we have, or we're dealing with the nitty gritty. We don't have enough. Look, this is where we are, guys, and this is how we have to adjust. That seems to work. Is there a danger on a macro level now when we're looking at government, national, to say this is where we are? So I can see where the management of information would come. If you don't really want the entire country to be in the know about how bad things really are, then I can see the reason why such information would be shared in the way in which it was. But is it dangerous, from your point of view, having worked within civil society, is it dangerous really to let the country know, as opposed to keeping it in the hands of just a few people who might be able to use that information? Is it dangerous being very clear and transparent about what the situation is when it comes to debt, when it comes to management of public funds? Is it dangerous?
I think you've almost answered your own question, and you framed it very well. And I'll go back to something that the former AG said. He said corruption is being written into the budget. And so projects are designed and created for the sole purpose, special purpose vehicles for corruption. Now, if this is the case, you can't give out that information, because the moment you give out that information, you're
exposing your own self.
Exactly.
And that's where now the danger lies. And this is where the National Assembly should just, be held to account. Forget about the National Treasury, the President, those MPs.
Yeah.
Those are the ones who need to answer some of these questions. Look at what, for example, Jaindi is saying. He says, basically, this information, which is available on the National Treasury website or the debt register, is organized in very simple columns. Column number 1 is the creditor. Column number 2, the purpose for borrowing the loan, and then interest rate, and then the repayment terms, and then cumulative amounts repaid, and finally, the amount outstanding as at June 30th, 2018. This tells you this is for the financial year 2017-2018. Okay. He says, as you interrogate these data more closely, you'll see some glaring gaps. First, you find several cases where the column for cumulative amounts paid in servicing some of these loans are left blank. This is 2017-2018 data where how much have you paid? Blank. Not filled. Okay, it begs the question, if the information is basic as how much you've paid is left blank, how then do you even authenticate this information? How do you say this information is actually good? Other inconsistencies, for example, he came across instances where the column that is supposed to contain information on the tenures and schedules of repayment of loans is blank. Others where the information provided is vague. And he raises this issue and says, look in other countries. In a country like Mozambique, where there was a big scandal, remember the tuna issue? There was a big scandal because some people in the National Treasury, in government in Mozambique, had colluded with some people in commercial banks, international commercial banks, and they had come up with this way of borrowing some money, which was it was just a way of stealing public money. So it's not just about local. There are even international colluders and players in this. Now, if you don't have information on how much you borrowed, how much you owe, what the interest is, what the purpose for this was, how much you've paid, then what are you saying?
In fact,
And then
you
we're talking
hit it.
about, and we're saying, this is our national debt register, it's published. It's just ticking boxes. We were supposed to publish. We published.
You've hit
there.
it. You've hit it. They've ticked a box that would allow them to meet the minimum standard of the law. Additional information that needs to be in the register includes the issue of underwriters, because underwriters who secure the debt have an interest in like in the Mozambique case. It's the people behind the scenes. So yes, there's the loan, but they are the people who enable this loan to happen, and a lot of the shenanigans go on there. So actually, the debt register should also show who is underwriting this debt, what is their interest, what is their conflict. The other thing, the other information which Parliament asked for beginning of last year is where is the money going? Because sometimes you have a block figure saying district roads. You're like, which roads? Some of the projects are quite clear, but it has to be very specific. So when you give vague information, when information is missing, that is an avenue for stealing. And the last point I want to make when we come back to COVID and the COVID budget, what these interests around large infrastructure who are hiding in this register, what they do is that the government draws up a plan. For instance, now we have the ERS, Economic Recovery Strategy, prioritizing health, prioritizing agriculture, prioritizing the stimulus. But the people who are holding contracts look and say, "Nyinyi endeleeni, you go, munenda budget, endeni. Mwisho, the money goes into these non-performing loans and goes into the large infrastructure. So the point is that there are people hiding in this register who are able to countermand and circumvent the entire budget process. As we are busy saying, oh, yeah, civic education.
But is that really
Public
possible
participation.
within a country if it doesn't have the collusion of the highest officers in the land? Is it really possible? Year in, year out, year in, year out. But that is not difficult to answer. What I find fascinating is that in this day and age, where no matter how hard you try to hide, you will be caught out and you will be found, people still perpetrate things that eventually, it'll come out. Eventually, it will come out. It doesn't matter how clever these individuals think they are. They don't have a monopoly on cleverness. It doesn't matter how crafty they believe they have gone around doing this. At some point, it's going to come out. And in this case, it's sooner rather than later.
In their mind, they will deal with it when it comes out.
You see, dealing with it brings me to the question that I really wanted to ask. Do we really have people in authority and in government who are averse to corruption?
I think we do.
Clean people.
They're averse. It's clear. You look at their actions and they're even...
And by government, you mean the political side of government or the public side, the public service side? Of
Our
government?
politicians are a bit of a lost cause. So let's leave them out of this discussion.
Okay. So you mean the public
You know
service?
something, City? I liked the trajectory you were taking. Then you came back to this question you asked about the people. And I think we need to still focus on the systems, because you talked about the political leadership and you said, yes, when political leadership has entrenched interests, then the system doesn't work. So it's not really. I think there are lots of good people in public service. There are
And
few.
for
There are few
example,
bad
like,
ones.
like these ones.
But
Who exactly?
no, but why? The question you're asking is why do why do people continue to perpetrate corruption, knowing it will be revealed? I think the tolerance to it being revealed has gone very high. People know, oh my gosh, I've been named in the media, but you'll be named, and in time,
People will forget.
Yeah.
people will
people
forget,
forget.
and the wheels of justice will not catch up with you. And if you remember what John told us, John Githongo, when he was talking about corruption, he was saying fighting corruption through the judicial process actually is the surest way to fail in your fight against corruption. Why? Because the courts can only manage a certain number of corruption cases at a time because they are so intricate. You actually need the public service system to deal with it. You actually need systems to work. So the point, what am I saying? It comes back to political leadership. We have bad political leadership, we need to call it, but we have a few opportunities, a few levers to begin exercising good governance. And we don't need to brandish all of government corrupt, because that's not the point. The point is there are a few people countermanding the system, making public officers afraid to speak up.
Wanjiru.
Yes.
Do we have people who are in government who are, this one, I'll join the politicians as well, who are willing to go against the dictates of the people who are responsible for their appointment?
Actually,
For example,
People who
let me
can
give you an
stand up
example.
to
the
Look
corrupt.
at this
Thank
register
you.
now.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Look at this register now. It was not compiled by the person at the top. And it is very clear that there's information that's missing, which we've already established that information, they have it. Now the person, because it's rudimentary now, the person now who is responsible for putting it together, knowing that there's some information missing, has put it out in the manner in which they've put it out because they've been ordered to do just so. Afraid that if they don't do it, they either will lose their job, again, the person who has appointed them. Now, living under that cover, that if you don't do it as you have been told, you might either lose your job or something else onto what might happen to you. Now, that's the situation that we are dealing with.
You know the situation
Somebody
that we
else
have?
who is holding this over your head.
I think we have, yeah, you know.
Wanjiru,
The
some years
reason-
ago.
my thing,
When
I
the-
know, it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
My
Wanjiru,
thinking-
it's not really that difficult. Many
But then
many
you're brandishing
many
everybody
years
with the
ago,
same brush.
yes, indeed, and we should.
How useful
Unless
is
you
that?
show you're different, you are tied with the same brush.
Yes.
Which other
Unless
brush
you
should
now
we tie
say-
you
So
with?
it forces
Unless
you
you
to
now
stand
say,
out.
I
Yes.
know this is my job. I sit at the head of this particular department that's going to put this report together. And I'm supposed to be making this information public to Kenyans. I know that there's something that we should be making public that we are not. You're saying stand out, that person will be able to say, actually, you know what? I'm not going to be part of this.
Wanjiru, some
I will
years
not
ago-
be part of this. I will either stand aside, because if we're saying that truly, I will stand aside and I will not be
So what
part
you're
of this
saying is that the
process.
CS of Treasury or the director of public debt should resign.
No.
That's what you're saying.
This CS.
No, they should refuse
They
to
should
do
No.
refuse
things
to
Look.
put to do things in the manner in which
Look,
we're talking about.
the
now.
CS
Refuse
is a
to be
year
part of
is
it.
a year in this
I won't.
office.
Yeah.
Okay? It's a busy ministry. 1 year.
City, you've just changed. Can you?
No,
be on
I
the
haven't
same-
changed. I'm
Yeah.
actually being factual. Look, many years ago, when President Moi was in power, he was a powerful president, and people did not differ with him, privately or even publicly. Maybe privately they did. See, privately we don't know, but publicly.
Yeah.
There was a minister for finance who did precisely that. With that statement, told the country we actually broke. Simple. We don't have money. It's not complicated. He lost that job.
A few hours later.
Oh, he lost that job. I mean, he stopped being finance minister. That was.
But he was telling the truth.
Yeah, no, but you see the
That,
thing
that
is,
in my opinion, it's standing out saying, folks, you know, we're talking around this thing.
Who
Huh?
was this? Isahaki.
It was
let's
Nyachai.
be
Nyachai.
on.
Yes,
let's
he said, look, Mr. Simon Nyachai said, we are broke. Nobody was supposed to say we are broke. We were supposed to dance around that issue, talk around it. He did.
Yeah, but now how? Let's be specific here. One, the president himself has acceded, has accepted there is corruption in government.
Many
And
times, not-
many times.
Yeah.
So you know, we need to be specific. Let's focus on something tangible because
Exactly. This is
we're
a good
we're
thing.
in a very unusual time where the head of state, who should be responsible for ensuring,
Isn't he?
for leading, for the political leadership, is the one who is most upset with corruption. Yet,
he?
corruption, do you see? So this is, so that is why it is more strategic for us to be very specific. And I think when we talk about debt, we are saying, Jaindi's last word, the thieves are hiding in the register. The World Bank and IMF, particularly the IMF, has called for a comprehensive external audit of this register. The DSSI requirements require public participation and accountability in this whole relief process. So what we are saying is that we have good conditions now to audit the register, to ensure public participation, civil society engages, and that is what we need to push for,
Now,
so that
who
we
in
can
the
get
system
these
is
seeds.
responsible for doing these things that you're talking about?
Good point.
Who is that?
Good
Who is
point.
responsible for doing this? Ensuring that there's public participation, ensuring that a proper audit of this register is done, ensuring that all these places where these thieves we are saying are hiding then are opened up. Who is responsible for that? And that is not under the influence of a higher power who wants to make sure that information is not made public.
Yes, but Ndu, let's ask that question proactively, because who is responsible for upholding it's the CS. It is very clear that the CS is responsible for upholding those principles, right? What we are then going to ask the CS is, how do we take this forward? First, why are there gaps in the register? Two, how do we ensure what are the plans for the external audit to ensure it's comprehensive? As civil society, one of our lamentations and one of our proposals to the CS, who is a year in office. So actually, we are not that hard on this CS, because ever since the CS came in, we have seen some positive action.
A lot of problems.
He inherited a lot of problems. We've seen more disclosures. The one thing we haven't been successful in getting is we are not able to really reach. We don't have a civil society. We can't say there is good public participation, good engagement with civil society. For instance, we've been asking, could we have a public forum on debt where you come and talk to people and field questions, that really is open?
Wanjiru, let me ask you this question. I personally like what civil society does. I love it, actually. But have you asked the question why it is the public support which you ought to have, in my mind, has not been as forthcoming as it should? Because the role that civil society plays in this country is actually the opposition. Because you point out these things. The public knows what you're saying is true. You have evidence to support what you're saying. But the public sits back and watches. So are we a nation of spectators?
It comes back to that question that you are asking.
Yes.
Whether we are part and parcel of this corruption. And I think my answer to that is in how we define corruption. Corruption is when somebody else is eating. That's it.
When you're bribing a policeman.
When
you're
somebody
the
else is
beneficiary,
doing
you're
it.
not-
The
it's not
beneficiary
corrupt.
Yeah, when you're
business.
not the beneficiary or the perpetrator or somebody close to you. For example, now look at the latest spat between Kalonzo Musyoka and William Ruto, right? Oh, you stole land. No, you're the bigger thief.
And both in Kanu,
Okay.
for heaven's sake.
You're
They're
the biggest
beneficiaries
thief.
of that system.
You are the thief. If you look at their supporters, all in social media, in public places, you will now see people who line up with Kalonzo's side
been
and
at
say,
it, haven't they?
that guy is the one who's a bigger thief. You'll see people who support William Ruto's pointing fingers and saying, but you see that NYS land. And let's not talk about any side that we've been... As far as they're concerned, so we've defined corruption into, if I support William Ruto in this particular conversation, it's Kalonzo who's corrupt. If I support Kalonzo, it is Ruto who's corrupt. And that it ends there. So that conversation will just end. If those two gentlemen shake hands, there's no corruption.
Eric, you put it well.
It cancels out.
In fact, your wisdom even goes beyond your new denomination. You're speaking very well today. But I go back to this. When you're in a situation of endemic corruption, you will have these kind of contradictions. And so we have to find a lever. The aim is, when you're in an inherently corrupt, compromised system, which is what we are in, where even good people lie low, we have to look for levers. And we need to differentiate symptoms from causes. My view is that public engagement and this kind of acceptance of corruption is because this is not the cause of the corruption. It's a symptom of it. The cause is the lack of political accountability. And that's what we have to make corruption expensive for somebody. And it has to be for our political leaders.
You see my problem,
And the
Wanjiru?
question is, how do we do that? How do we
the
make
one-
it expensive for
The
parliament
one that
that
I've been
has been
raising all
asleep on the
along,
job?
Remember, it's against a backdrop. Everything you say is true, but it's against a backdrop of us having normalized corruption. The example Eric
I've
gives the
agreed with
perfect
you.
one. We've normalized it. And corruption should be exceptional. Wrongdoing should be exceptional. But when wrongdoing in whatever form
Becomes normal, has become
then
normal.
that really, in my opinion, is the problem. Forget the leaders and what have these people live in this country. They are part of us. They are relatives. They are friends. The people we know. The normalizing of this wrong thing, where wrong has now become right and wrong has become okay.
City, what I agree with you. We have normalized it. And the point that I'm making is that we then need to ask, how do we deal with corruption? Do we do mass civic education? Do we do BBI? BBI is proposing to deal with corruption by giving us a national ethos.
Yep.
A national ethos will stop us from
currently
being...
doesn't exist.
Yes, we have a national ethos that favors corruption. So national ethos. So we need to deal with the cause. And that's, I agree with you. But I believe that there are small opportunities in which we can begin to show that corruption is expensive. And I'm saying this from a civil society point of view. We don't have the resources government has. We are outnumbered, outmanned, outgunned.
No, you're not.
But we've got something on our side.
You're not outgunned.
We're not outgunned, eh?
No.
What we
You've
have-
actually taken over a role that the church should actually be playing in many ways.
Church and the opposition.
Yes, I'm saying this because when you play the role of a conscience, it's a role the church abrogated. It's their role, but somehow I think they found it more profitable to join whatever administrative system that we have. Once in a while you hear a lone voice saying something that they ought to have said, but most times they just they are compliant. But let me explain this. This didn't begin now. There's a gentleman by the name of Paul Ngei. Paul Ngei seemed to have been loved by the then President Jomo Kenyatta because that man perpetrated things that were beyond his time. When he was minister in charge of agriculture, that man was thrown out of office because he misplaced 2,000 bags of maize, which were meant for debt relief. Okay? Among the many ills that man perpetrated, we actually had a constitutional moment when the president had to alter certain things so that this guy remains. It went that far. But the president liked him. And the president had those powers.
Exactly.
Now, what I'm saying is, it was not normal then, and it was treated as something that was considered an aberration. We do the complete opposite right now. We celebrate thieves.
It was how many bags of maize again?
2,000.
Surely.
The small peanuts.
That was something to make it a big conversation. You see, that's the problem we have right now. Let's take a break on KTN Home. We are taking a break on KTN Home. We'll continue the conversations on Spice FM in the next hour on KTN Home as well. We'll be having a conversation with Ukuriatani, Ambassador Ukuriatani, the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Planning. Right now, we are having a conversation about national debt. We have our debt register now, which is about 2 financial years ago. But we also have conversations about who do we owe, how much do we owe, are we about to raise the debt ceiling? Now, what conditions should be put in place by the National Assembly when we talk about raising the debt ceiling, or even by the Senate? Wanjiru, you seem to be saying that there's something that can be done, in terms of changing this whole conversation, changing the national psyche on how to deal with corruption. If you look at what the government has done, in terms of saying, let's go for the big fish. Let's parade the DPP and the EACC and the DCI saying, let's go for these high impact cases. Take the Cabinet Secretary in charge of the National Treasury to court and charge him. Take a governor to court and charge him. Is that one of the things that you're saying? Beyond that, then how else do we make sure that we are dealing with corruption, making corruption, because what you're saying is let's make corruption an expensive venture.
Right. And I will not purport to have solutions for one of the most preponderant problems we have as a country, which is corruption.
I can help you.
But,
I have a solution.
But, yeah. I think the justice system, of course, is not the most effective way of fighting corruption. It's not working. We need to build social we need social sanction. So as a coalition, in my view, our success will be defined by the extent to which we are able to identify those perpetrators of corruption around debt and to build social sanction against them. Whether the legal process comes in or not, we want to make it expensive in the eyes of Kenyans so that that person becomes an anathema.
So by social sanction is basically saying, you're my neighbor, I'm no longer going to talk to you.
Yes.
My children will not play with you.
You
Such
when
kind
you
of
come
stuff.
to church, you sit at the back
Well,
or
how do
sit
you move
quietly, we
people
won't take
from
your
the
money.
mindset of admiring these people whom we know have perpetrated ill? Progressive governments like the Chinese government understand how to deal with these things. Because
Sentence you to death.
No, they
Within
shoot
hours.
you.
They shoot you.
Oh, they
Because
shoot you?
yes,
Yes.
it is considered crime against humanity, because that's what it is.
You take life, yours is taken.
When you commit
Yeah,
these
well, this
really
is the same government
atrocious
that
things,
sanctions corruption in other countries that aren't China. So be very careful when you cite China as a positive example, because
No, in this particular case, not on everything.
You know, you have to look holistically. A government that's able to shoot you for corruption also has suspended your other human rights. We do not want
just corruption.
We do not want to suspend or compromise our human rights. We're saying
So-
in a human rights,
so the
socio-economic
people who
rights
suffer
setting,
because
how
of
do we
this,
enforce corruption?
this aberration, what about their human rights? If you're found, look, we have a court of law, we have a system. If you're found guilty of crimes, these crimes which I'm
People
calling
have
crimes
died of
against
COVID.
Yes, and why have they died? People who didn't need to die.
Yes.
Right. Now, when you're talking about the
People
deaths-
die of hunger who
when you're
don't
talking-
need to die.
When you're, in Kenya, is the death sentence even legal?
It is.
It
still
is.
legal.
Still
Is it-
upheld in
It's
Kenya.
still upheld, eh?
Yes.
Yeah, well,
It-
there's
That the courts have
my
basically
view,
just suspended
my view,
issuing them, but it's still
right. My view is this: China is a bad example because it is one of the bigger perpetrators of corruption, even in our setting.
Okay, forget the name
right?
China.
So
Talk about
when you have
speedy, bringing somebody speedily to justice and executing them.
we need speedy justice. But then when you're talking about speedy justice, you have to look at what is happening in terms of the interference with the judiciary.
You see, now you're interfering with a process that actually would bring about change. Did you see what you're doing?
No. I believe we
You're fighting
need to
change.
uphold
You're fighting change.
You're anti-development.
democratic human rights, socio-economic principles, and we need to
Whose
find
rights-
accountability in that framework.
Wanjiru, whose rights
How
takes
do you do
precedence?
that?
Whose rights take
All
precedence?
this time that
The
they've been
victims
trying
or
to
the
do it, it
perpetrators?
didn't
Yes,
work.
exactly. Who?
It hasn't
Who
worked
is the victim
all
here?
this time.
What do you mean? What do you
It
mean
hasn't worked all this time.
Yeah, because our
Then
political
you'll be telling
leaders.
people you need to
Okay,
stop
guys,
corruption, and then they'll say
guys,
you blow in their air
Top
and
of the
pamper them.
hour.
It can't
Let's
happen.
take a look at traffic shortly in a couple of seconds. And then after that, we have a conversation with the Cabinet Secretary in charge of the National Treasury and Planning, Ambassador Kuriatani. Good morning.